Well, here we are again, a new inductee into the ever-growing wall of shame. By the way, so far in these videos, when I find a professing Christian who is treats Adventists like they're Christians, of course we know they're not, and is presented with the evidence, has ever looked at the evidence and said, "Oh, you're right. I see the evidence. I see what I said. Shouldn't have said that. Didn't know." Hasn't happened yet. Every person I've shared everything with has either ignored me or doubled down on their defense of Adventism. Amazing what happens here. So this newest inductee is a guy named Dr. H. Wayne House. So before I start into this, I want to start a pertinent review of the scriptures. And these are two scriptures that are very pertinent to this. James 3:1. Not many of you should become teachers and write books, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. Boy, that one right there, I could just stop. That one applies to this one solidly. Acts 20:28. Pay careful attention to yourselves and all the flock. What I have here in this video is a self-described Christian apologist and an author of books and many articles. Probably over a year ago, I came across, this book. I was in my local used bookstore, going through the books, look at the spine. I see this here, Doctrine Twisting. Well, isn't that interesting? I pick it up and I go, okay, what's he saying? Anything about Seventh-day Adventists? Oh, yeah, he's got something on Seventh-day Adventists. I go to the page and I start reading it and I go, okay, I'm going to have to contact this guy and find out what he believes. Now, this book was written in 2003. This is not 2003. We're many decades past 2003. So the beliefs that he had then, are they the beliefs that he has now? That was my thought, and that's why I thought, when I approach him, that's what I'm going to ask him. So at a minimum, I knew I had to do that. So look with me here. Here's this book, the very one I bought from the used bookstore. You can see again that copyright date of 2003. So when I opened it up in the bookstore and I read the first sentence, which is right here in red before you, the Seventh-day Adventists are orthodox, I went, oh my gosh, no, they're not. And that's, like I said, when I knew I needed to contact this guy. He goes on to say this. It's clear that Seventh-day Adventists believe in the literal second coming of Jesus Christ to the earth. Yet the group's doctrines of the sanctuary and the investigated judgment need to be examined in light of Adventist history. He goes on and just talks about some Adventist history. See, we're on page 192, and he does that from 193. So then he goes to page 194 here, and look what he says. According to Edson and Crozier's new doctrine. Let me stop here. It's not Crozier's new doctrine. It's Hiram Edson's. Crozier was the publisher of the Daystar magazine that published the vision of Hiram Edson. So I can tell you right off the bat here, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Then he goes on to say, in 1844, Christ entered the second phase of his ministry in the heavenly sanctuary. And ever since 1844, Jesus has been investigating and reviewing the cases of believers to determine their worthiness for eternal life. What he just wrote here, if he's a Christian apologist, you got to realize that is contradicting the Bible in a very significant way. It's actually denial of the cross. But he doesn't even realize that when he typed that sentence in his book on page 194. He doesn't know that Adventists are denying the atonement right there in front of his face. Because if believers are being judged for their eternal worthiness after 1874, that means nothing happened on the cross. The cross is of no effect. But this Christian apologist doesn't seem to get that. All right, let's move on here. And then he talks about that, about being in the heavenly temple. Of course, we know that. That's in the 28 Beliefs book. That is a belief they currently believe today. And here is the 28 Beliefs book. And of course, that's belief 24. There's a sanctuary in heaven. In it, that's the sanctuary, Christ ministers on our behalf, making available to believers the benefits of atoning sacrifice offered once and for all on the cross. So where are the benefits being offered? In the sanctuary. Has nothing to do with the cross. Next set of red lines. In 1844, at the end of the prophetic period of 2,300 days, he entered the second and last phase of his atoning ministry. I have to say to this so-called Christian apologist, Where does the Bible say Christ has a second phase, last phase, etc. of his atoning ministry? Doesn't. He goes on page 195 of his book, and this was most astounding. This is a quote I'm very familiar with. This is an Ellen White quote. The blood of Christ, while it was to release the repentant sinner from the condemnation of the law, was not to cancel sin. Sin, which stand on record in the sanctuary, in the final atonement. See, here we are again, this phased atonement process. He quotes this, and I circled that. You can see here, note 35. He doesn't even quote the original book. He does what you're not supposed to do when you write a book, which is quote secondhand sources. I looked it up. He's quoting Walter Martin's Kingdom of the Cults, which quotes the patriarchs and prophets from Kingdom of the Cults. It doesn't even have a date in it. At least that's what I looked up in his book there. I'm going to do him the favor and show you. Here's Patriarchs and Prophets, first edition, 1890. Here's the actual quote, which is on page 357, which his book doesn't cite. And there's the very quote right there, which is a denial of the atonement. He is reading a clear denial of the atonement. The blood of Christ was not to cancel sin on the cross, but the sin is going to be dispositioned in Adventism in this 1844 and later sanctuary. Again, this guy reads clear denial of the atonement of Christ on the cross, and he doesn't realize what he's reading. Then he goes on to say this, speaking of more incorrect. He says, the Adventists have always accepted the orthodox understanding of salvation. I went, this guy truly does not understand Adventism. Let me just share with you two examples. Let's use this Ellen White book. We have to use Ellen White, right? Because she's inspired, right? Belief 18. And what does she say here on page 287? The Sabbath is the golden class that unites God and his people. It means eternal salvation to keep the Sabbath. That's it. So is that his idea of Adventists have always accepted the orthodox view of salvation? So salvation is keeping the Sabbath. Now, this guy's truly unschooled and unlearned. This guy meaning Dr. H. Wayne House. Let me just give you another one. Most of us are familiar with this, Christ Object Lessons, very famous Seventh-day Adventist book. Again, we're going to stick with the seer herself, Ellen White. This was done in 1900. And what does she say? Those who accept the Savior, however sincere, should never be taught to say or feel they are saved. This is misleading. He probably had no clue what Adventism really teaches. But yet he writes, oh, they got an orthodox view of salvation. No, they don't. And I just showed you two examples. Then he goes on to say this. Our Adventist friends deny by implication the full validity of the atonement of Christ. He's right. But then he says, strangely, however, Adventists passionately affirm the full validity of Christ's atonement. This guy doesn't realize, if he's supposed to be a Christian apologist, Dr. H. Wayne House, you just ran into the semantic wall. Because Adventists will use the word Christ and the atonement, but they don't mean what the Bible means. They don't mean what Christians mean. So this guy's saying, well, I read this in their literature, but then they say this. He's presented with clear denial of the atonement of Christ in Seventh-day Adventist literature, and he doesn't recognize it. It's right there in front of his face. He doesn't see it. And then he talks to Adventists who say, yes, we believe in the atonement. Yes, they do in Adventism. They'll use the word atonement, and it's going on right now. Second phase of atonement, which the Bible knows nothing of. Horrible book. Let's just show this one here. Sabbath School Lesson Quarterly, which proves the point. The ministry of the priest almost always follows. What this should tell us is that, however crucial and fundamental, Christ's death on the cross was, symbolized by the animal sacrifices in the earthly sanctuary, his work for us did not end at the cross. Nothing ended at the cross. This was done in 2001, 2 years before the copyright of his book. So in other words, a religion which denies the one and final atonement of Christ on the cross is a religion he declares orthodox. Absolutely nonsense. As of May of 2025, on his website, he still advertises this book as one of his great accomplishments. Look with me here, and there it is, his books. There's his official website, and Doctrine Twisting is one of those books. So, like I said, when I saw this in the bookstore, and I read the entry on Seventh-day Adventism, I said, I got to contact this guy, and because I was looking at the copyright going, okay, it's over 20 years old. It's possible he could have changed his view on Adventism since he wrote this book. I wouldn't expect to be advertising it if it's that wrong, but that's how I'm going to approach it. So I'm going to write him a letter. I'm going to reach out to him. And here's what I did. In March of 2024, I'm just going to kind of skim over this and read it once, because I used this letter several times in several emails you're going to see here. I explained to him in the very first paragraph, I'm a Christian apologist. I've been doing this kind of stuff for 30 plus years. I'm focusing on Adventism. Second paragraph, I told him my story. Hey, I was in a used bookstore, came across your book. And then I cite the pages on pages 191 to 200 essentially, and how he credits Adventism with being orthodox. And I say, when you do that, you just give him your stamp of Christian approval. And then I cite for him in the next paragraph how Adventism is not orthodox. And you can see in parentheses I got numbers 1, 2, 3, which on the next page are all the references from all the original sources I used, and I sent him a letter. I sent this letter to 2 separate email addresses that I could find for him. And then while I was also doing additional research that day, I found a third email address, and here it is. So I sent it to one additional address, and that one replied to me the same day, and they said, hey, thanks for writing. I passed this message along. Let me know if you need anything else. It's like, great. But you know what happened? Months went by. Nothing. 3 email addresses, the same letter, nothing. So I continue to do research. And here's what I did find. I found out that he's a council member on this group here called the Council on Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. And they list all their council members. And so here's a screenshot of him right in the middle of it. Well, this Council on Biblical Manhood and Womanhood has a contact portion. I thought, great, I will contact you. So in December of 2024, I contacted him. Everything below the red line you see here is exactly the same content that you saw in the first letter I read to you, but I said this differently. This will be my last attempt before, in other words, doing a YouTube video on this book and its content. In other words, come on, come out, talk to me, let's do it. And nothing. So here we are, months later. I sent 5 messages to him in several different organizations, and apparently he's not interested. This man does not deserve the title Christian apologist by declaring Seventh-day Adventism as an orthodox religion, a religion that clearly denies the atonement of Christ. And this guy is so clueless that when he reads it, he doesn't even realize what he's reading. His book, Doctrine Twisting, here has done and will continue to do damage to the Christian world. So with that, I got to say shame and dishonor to Dr. H. Wayne House. And there's a screenshot of his website, and I put the X on defend because he's not defending anything. He's actually defending Adventism. Remember what I said about James 3:1? Not many of you should become teachers and write books, especially when you write nonsense. All copies of this book, in summary, need to be destroyed to mitigate its damage to the Christian community. If this guy wants to make it right, he needs to go up and buy every copy out there. Have a bonfire every week when you buy these. This is not worthy to be in circulation. It is deceiving the Christian community as we speak. But you know, my assessment of Mr. H. Wayne House in this book, he's what I call a paper apologist. He sits down at his desk, reads a bunch of books about, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, Seventh-day Adventists, whatever it is, in this case, Seventh-day Adventists, reads a bunch of books about them. We saw Kingdom of the Cults he cited. And says, okay, now I'm going to write a book on Seventh-day Adventists. He just reads books about them, decides he's going to write a chapter about them. This is my opinion on how he did it. And his chapter, it's nonsense. He doesn't know. He's a paper apologist. He has no practical experience. He doesn't deal with Seventh-day Adventists. He doesn't study their doctrine like I do and many of you that are watching this. But yet he writes a book, puts his whatever his doctorate degree is behind. And I'm, the grand doctor here, and look what I wrote, it's authoritative. No, it's not. It's a piece of junk, and it needs to be destroyed because it is doing damage to the Christian world. It's deceiving Christians to this day. So, H. Wayne House, Dr. H. Wayne House, you are not a trusted source of apologetical material, and from all appearances that I can tell, you're just a paper apologist. You just read somebody else's book, repair it back, what they've done, and you put it in some and you sell it. And shame on InterVarsity Press and its editors for letting this slip by too. Shame on you.